Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Scorpion Cigar Reviews. Today I will be reviewing the Macanudo Vintage Maduro. This is the 1997 vintage. It says right there on the secondary label. This is the cigar that has that really nifty metal band. It's usually pretty easy to get it off. Here it comes, and no damage to the wrapper. Now this band, I mean, it's got some weight to it. It's a nice metal. I don't know. At first I thought maybe it was like a polished aluminum or something, but it's got enough weight to it that I would say it's more than just aluminum. It honestly, look on the inside of it, it almost looks like stainless steel, but I couldn't believe they'd spend that kind of money on a band without charging, you know, $20 or $30 for the cigar. So I don't know what kind of metal this is. I mean, it's, you know, same color inside and out. You can see where they've honed out the inside, you know, the honing marks, but it's like it's chromed or something on the outside and then engraved. Real nice piece. This is a Perfecto size cigar. You see tapered on both ends, and the end that you light, it's almost like it's been clipped to where you would think that would be the cap end of it, but it is not, I assure you. I'm going to take off the secondary band so I can get lit up. Now, as I mentioned, this is the Maduro, so there's a very dark wrapper. Has very tight seams. You can make them out though, but they're really good, nice and tight. Some minor veining. There's a few bumps where you can see the tobacco bunch underneath. Now, it's not a real firm cigar. It's got a slight amount of sponginess to it, and there are a couple places that are a little softer than they should be. I've had one of these before. I didn't really have any major issues with the burn. It was, what I remember is just, I was just in love with it. Just the taste of the cigar was phenomenal. The feel of the wrapper is, it's almost, gives you like a waxy, I don't know, it leaves your fingers feeling like you've been playing with like a beeswax type of thing. Almost sticky, but like a tack cloth. There you go. But not quite that sticky, but along those lines. I thought I saw some toothiness, but maybe not. Not sure what I'm seeing on there. It almost looks like a gritty substance of some sort, but it's, I don't believe it is. Anyway, a lot of cedar on the wrapper. Maybe a little bit of bread dough, the foot. Now, you know, it's a real small opening on the foot, so I'm really not getting a lot from it. Maybe some tea, real subtle. Slight hint of spices on there, but I mean, it's ever so slight. I mean, I've crammed this thing, you know, up to my brain, and you know, it's just so subtle on the scents. Anyway, using my Cigar, just clip a little bit off the end here. Don't want to do too much. I can always go back and clip more if need be. And I've also noticed I forgot to bring my ashtray over here to the table, so I'll be getting that shortly. Perfect draw. A lot of kitchen spices. Some cumin, a little bit of, ever so mild bit of white pepper in there. Maybe a little bit of oregano, maybe. be mistaken on that. Almost a chili powder with all the various spices that are in that. So that's, and I realize I use that term a lot, chili powder. The thing is, it covers a wide range of spices, and I've mentioned before, I don't know what all the spices are that are in a can of, you know, chili powder, or you know, the packet of chili powder mix, but you know, there's probably a little bit of cayenne, there's probably some cumin, some various peppers, but I'm picking so much out. It just reminds me of chili. So, I'm sorry if I use that term often, but that's what it reminds me of, is chili powder. So, with that, let's see if my lighter's going to behave. Before I do that, let me set this down. Get my teacher's blended Scotch whiskey poured. Now, being the idiot that I am, and I'm an idiot, whenever I pour myself a dram, I was thinking that a dram, and I don't know where I got the, well, I'll tell you where I got it from. I thought a dram was 3 ounces. Turned out it's 1/8 of an ounce. Boy, was I wrong. Then I got thinking, well, how did I come up with that? I said, oh, I know what it was. When I make hot buttered rum, they say use a jigger of rum. And I could swear I read somewhere that a jigger was about 3 ounces. Now, I double checked to make sure, you know, because, well, heck, if I was wrong about the dram, maybe I'm wrong about the jigger. When I checked, it says a jigger is about 1.5 ounces. So either I've been an idiot all my life, or perhaps the recipe that I was using to make the hot buttered rum, because it didn't make a whole lot in a coffee mug, I just doubled everything, so it was 3 ounces. That could very well be where I was thinking, you know, why I was thinking that, you know, a jigger was 3 ounces. And then somehow I transferred that to a dram. So anyway, let me go get my ashtray, and then I'll come back and I'll start getting toasted. I'll be right back. Alright, I'm back. I've got my ashtray and my cigar lit. Now, me being the idiot that I am, when I clipped the end of the cigar, the cap, then I set the cigar down on the table to go get my ashtray. Then I come back and I pick up the cigar, and I was like, uh-oh. They were identical, both ends, the same size. I'm thinking, oh my God, how much? I guess it probably doesn't really matter, but I'm thinking, well, which end did I clip? So I picked up the end that I clipped off. It's about the size of a chocolate chip. I put it to one end. Boy, that's pretty close. I put it to the other end. So, ah, there it goes. Matches up nicely. So now I know this is the end I put in my mouth. You know, whatever. Now, this cigar starts off like many other cigars, where there's a blast of flavors that maybe you would think, if this is all I get through this whole cigar, you know, I'm not going to like this. This is super strong blast of pepper, or, oh, it's got, you know, just this awful glue taste, or whatever. Okay, but, you know, a lot of cigars start off, when you first light them, they've got that blast of, you know, whatever it is, and, you know, just, you know, you work through it. And this started off the same way. It had a blast of pepper, maybe a little bit of glue on there, very forward flavors. They're already mellowing out. I might just lit this, you know, 30 seconds ago or whatever it was, not very long. Pepper's still there, the glue's going away. Pepper's not super strong. It's It almost takes on a cayenne pepper character, or perhaps even something along the lines of a red chili. It's spicy and hot, but not you know, like black pepper. It just, you get a big waft of black pepper, and all it does is, you know, just makes you want to sneeze and, you know, that kind of thing. But this, it's I would go along the lines of cayenne pepper. Rear of the palate. It's not just spicy, it's that hot spicy. So, I'd say cayenne pepper. The draw is good. Smoke's a little dry. But anyway, I'll set that down. And we'll come to the whiskey. Now, as I mentioned, this is Teacher's. It's Teacher's Highland Cream, blended Scotch. And this is bottled at 43% alcohol by volume. I also mentioned this is, I really like the shape of this bottle. Now, you know, they tell you that these flattened bottles, you know, you got to be careful, not real strong, you know, you drop them, they'll break, and blah, blah, blah. Well, you're not supposed to be dropping a bottle anyway. Sure, it's not as strong as a round bottle, but it feels really good in the hand. Or, you know, if you have a little smaller hand, you can hold it sideways or whatever. But I really like the shape of the bottle. And it's got some nice designs on it. Embossed. It says Teachers on the side, embossed. And it's got their coat of arms or crest or whatever you'd like to call it, front and back, down there on the bottom, right here. Let's see if you can see that. Like I said, it's on both sides of the bottle. Established 1830, written up here at the top. Real nice packaging. You know, not something where they went, you know, real extravagant or anything and spent way too much money and jacked the price up. This was, I think it was $20. I think that's what it was, $20 for a 750 milliliter bottle. Now, that said, like I said, this is a blended Scotch whiskey. I also like to point out I have new whiskey glasses that I'm using. They're smaller than the one I was using before, which was basically a stemless wine glass. And it worked out perfect. I really liked it a lot. Now, I was looking for, you know, an authentic whiskey glass, a Glencairn glass. The thing I don't like about the Glencairn glasses, they don't really have a stem. The base, it's just really thick. Comes right off the bottom of the glass, and you just have this thick base. And I don't really, you know, care that much for the look. Now I have my stemless wine glasses where they're thick on the inside, so it has that weight. But now my glass of water that I use, see, you can see it. It's got a lot of glass in the bottom, and it's similar to my wine glass that I was using. Now the shape of this is, if you look, almost identical to this, to the glass that I'm using now. The glass I'm using now from a whiskey glass is actually a liqueur glass. However, it has the proper shape, and this being the same shape, I could use it as a stemless or baseless, because basically the base is built within the glass portion itself. And this would give me, you know, larger quantities, but it's not necessary. Now this glass is quite a bit thicker. This one's kind of dainty and delicate, but that's all right. I'm gonna try this out. I kind of like it. I mean, you know, you're drinking whiskey, you're not guzzling it, you're not, you know, doing shots or whatever. You're just enjoying your whiskey. Take a little draw on this before it goes out. So, that's what I've got going on here. The Teacher's is a very smooth blended Scotch whiskey. Probably one of the smoothest, well-balanced, good blend of the blended Scotches that I've had, you know, to date. Even at 43%, there's not a real alcohol bite on the nose. more on the arrival with the alcohol, but it's not overbearing. But anyway, long finish. Good stuff. Anyway, we'll get back to this more later. Go ahead and set that down. And I'll come back somewhere in the first third of the Macanudo Vintage 1997. Be back. We're back with the whiskey. Now, I measured to see just where 3 ounces was, since that's about what I was using. And it's way up in here. So I've got about 1.5 ounces, which would be a jigger. Now, when I was doing the 3 ounces, that's where my measurement mark was for when I would add a teaspoon of water to anything. So now I'm using a smaller glass, and I'm doing 1.5 ounces instead of the 3 ounces. So I guess if I was going to add a teaspoon before, I do half a teaspoon now. However, this is a blended Scotch, and even though it's at 43%, I'm not going to add a whole lot. I'm just going to dip the tip of my teaspoon in my glass of water and put this where you can see it. Just let a couple little drops come out. If they'll come off, they're holding on. Oh, there we go. Look like about 3. I guess all in all, it's maybe at best 1/4 of the teaspoon that I put in there, at best. Give it just a slight little slosh. Oh yeah, that's opening up already. I'm going to put my little plastic Pringles cap on there. Keep the bugs out, as well as hold in the vapors when the alcohol and the water mix. Opens up the scents. Don't want it just, disappear on me while I'm waiting. So, we'll let that sit for a minute, and we'll come back. See you in a little bit. All right, we're 25 minutes or so. And we're in the first third. Now, I did ash it because the ash is loose and flaky on this cigar. It's, I ashed probably somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of an inch already. And I probably have another close to 1/2 an inch on there, and it's pretty flaky and loose already. So, and I did have to touch it up a little bit because after I ashed, it started burning a little wonky. One side wasn't burning real well, so I touched it up. And, so it's still really loose. There's a nice crack developing all the way around. So I'll give this just a moment, and then I'll ash. Picking up a little bit of flint. A little bit of cayenne pepper in there still. A little bit dry. Rear palate, the cayenne pepper is mid palate, kind of from the halfway point on the tongue all the way towards the rear of the tongue, and then the dryness is even further back than that. So the cigar hasn't really come into its own yet. The sweet spot of this cigar is about halfway through, somewhere in the second third there. So I expect that this will really come forward with its flavors, probably in the next 20 minutes or so. So with that, I did go ahead and add a few more drops of water to the whiskey. Still opening up. Alright, that alcohol's really mellowed on the nose. I mean, it's still there, but it's not, you don't get that alcohol burn. Smells like whiskey. Who figured? Who knew? Very short, sweet arrival on the tip of the tongue. Almost a bourbon-y character on the finish. A little bit of orange peel. Good long finish on this. Now, put my cat background. There's some bugs flying around. Now with the Teacher's Highland cream. I'm sorry, Teacher's Highland cream. So this is a blended Scotch whiskey. And they say on the front label, rich, full flavor, high malt content. Distilled, blended, and bottled in Scotland, blah, blah, blah. Now, on the rear of the label, it says, all blended Scotch whiskeys are made of 2 kinds of Scotch whiskey, blah, blah, blah. We know that. Malt and grain. But Teacher's uniquely includes a higher percentage of Highland peated malt from the Ardmore Distillery, a feature which contributes to its unique character and flavor. So, I am a peated malt fan. It also says aged 36 months. Now, as I mentioned, I am a peated malt fan. I can smell the peat in there. It's very subtle. And as this sits a little longer covered up, that peat will come forward a little bit. So, we'll let the whiskey sit with the little plastic cap on it. Let it open up a little bit more. And I'll come back somewhere into the second third of the cigar. Alright, here we are about 45, about 45 minutes in. Every time I set the cigar down in the ashtray, if it's got a ½ an inch of ash or more, it tends to fall off. So it's definitely very loose and flaky, a little bit of tap, and there it came off. Now, I mentioned that the sweet spot on this cigar is about the halfway point. That was based on the first one of these that I smoked a couple weeks ago. I'm finding that this cigar isn't nearly as good as the first one that I smoked, which I find is often the case with cigars. Sometimes the first one's not so good, and then the second one is just phenomenal, but generally the first one I smoke is the better of the cigars. Definitely cayenne pepper, mid and rear palate. Smoke is dry, way in the back. I've picked up a slight bit of like a grilled meat. It's kind of a medium body, medium strength. The finish on the cigar has a very subtle cedary character to it. There's not a ton of smoke output on this, but I don't know how well you can see. It's not really showing up on the camera too much, but a little bit there. But when you draw on it, you get a pretty good mouthful. Not as much as some I've had, but more than others. The scent on the smoke itself, kind of like a rotting wood, like you're out in the forest and there's a tree that's fallen and it's been sitting there for years and years and years, just kind of crumbling away, a little bit damp, kind of rotting. You kind of get that scent. I mean, it's not an unpleasant scent. Slightly musty. Some of that does carry through into the flavor, but once again, very subtle. Short on the finish. Not real forward. Most of the flavors aren't very forward on this. I'm really noticing the dryness on the back of the palate, as well as the cayenne pepper, kind of mid-palate. It's not unpleasant, just not as good as the first one of these that I smoked. Now, the first one of these I smoked, I did score it 96 points. Now, I didn't use a scoring sheet at that time, just based on my overall impressions of the cigar. As I mentioned, it was a very phenomenal cigar for me. I've also mentioned in the past about various things, anywhere from inconsistencies in a cigar, you know, from one cigar to the next of the same cigar, to your surroundings, any exterior input that you get. It could be weather, it could be the company you're keeping, it could just be your mood. But yeah, this definitely isn't as good. So with that respect, I'm a little disappointed, because I was kind of saving this one, hoping that, you know, I would save it for a day when oh boy, I'm really in the mood for a really phenomenal cigar. So it could be that my expectations were just, you know, they're way up here, and the cigar is only here. So, I mean, darn little, there's little teeny tiny bees, a little bigger than a sweat bee, but it could just be kind of large sweat bees. I don't know. I don't know what they are, but they're annoying. It's been hanging around my table here. It's been hanging around my cigar. It's been hanging around my whiskey. I don't know if you can see this little guy. I guess that's a sweat bee, but he's annoying. I'm not really sweating. It's kind of cool out today, although it is damp. Set that cigar down. Come back to the whiskey. Now, I'd also like to mention that the cigar smoke, both on the scent on the nose and on the palate, does affect the taste of the whiskey and anything else that you're drinking. This perhaps wasn't a good pairing with this cigar. The cigar may be overpowering the whiskey. There definitely is a malty character to this whiskey. It's a pleasant whiskey. This is one of my favorite whiskeys, especially in a blended Scotch. I've had 2 other bottles of this, so obviously I like this. This is my 3rd bottle that I've bought in the past 6 months, something like that, 6 or 8 months. You get that kind of warm feeling from rear palate all the way down in your chest from the alcohol content. This is 43%. So even with the addition of maybe a total of a half a teaspoon of water into 1.5 ounces of whiskey, you still get, you know, the feelings in the mouth, down your throat, all the way down in your stomach of the alcohol. Not unpleasant. It's not, you know, super strong on that, but it's definitely there. It's a good whiskey. Could be that I've added too much water at this point. So, I'll come back somewhere in the final third. The flavors are starting to ramp up now, so I'll get into the final third, and I'll come back and tell you all about it. See you in a bit. Here we are, just a little over an hour in. I have asked it a couple times since I entered the final third. It's becoming richer in overall character. The smoke has brought on almost a sherry character, not the sweetness of the sherry, but there's a, not really sure how to describe it, but there's a scent when you're nosing a glass of sherry, there's a scent aside from the liquor portion of it that comes into the nose. It's just a character that sherry puts out. I'm sure it has something to do with the cooking of the sherry. If you didn't know that sherry, once it's actually fermented and is a drinkable liquor, it's heated for some length of time. I don't know what the exact length of time or the temperature or what all the conditions are, but I do know that sherry is basically cooked, and it imparts different characters into the sherry. So I'm getting that on the nose with the smoke. Getting a slight sweetness on the very tip of the tongue. Subtle. Hint of grilled meat. Starting to pick up a little bit of the nicotine deep in the chest. Clean burning. No issues there. As you can see, the burn is going quite wonky here. I've touched it up a couple times since I first started the cigar. I'll give it a minute and I'll probably touch it up again. So I'm going to set that down. Now, I did go ahead and add about another half teaspoon of water, so I've got probably a total of 1 teaspoon of water in this. Now grant you, I've sipped it several times, so it's down quite a bit. But if you ask different people, they'll all give you different opinions on what you do once you've added water. Everywhere from you just add the water, you don't do anything to it, and you get the scent. You nose it. You get a sweet character. Others say you just lightly tilt the glass around like this, let it touch the sides of the glass, and then you sniff it. You get a slightly different character. Some say you give it a slight swirl, while others say you give it a good slosh around, like you would with a glass of wine when you're trying to aerate it. Each of those will give you a slightly different nose. Now with that final addition of water, and at this point I certainly wouldn't be adding any more. There's not a whole lot left in the glass, but you can almost taste the water, almost. It's definitely mellowed the alcohol down quite a bit, both on the nose and on the palate. I'm not really picking up anything new, other than, as I mentioned, a slight hint of water. It's shortened the finish. So at this point I would say that is definitely too much water in there. So, I won't be adding any more water. So I'll get back to this cigar as the flavors are becoming more forward, richer. Slight hint of anise in the cigar. Once again, all these flavors seem to be really subtle, which is worlds different from the first of these that I smoked, where the flavors were very rich, very forward, and just a real meaty, chewy smoke. and I'm not getting that from this cigar. So I'll get this somewhere into the nub, and I'll be back with another update. I've finished that first dram of whiskey. I'm going to use the same teacher's whiskey. I'll go ahead and pour myself another dram. As I mentioned, the cigar seems to be overpowering the whiskey. So I'm going to drink this next dram without the addition of any water. Let it sit there for a little while. Now this whiskey will likely open up on its own in the bottle as the level of the whiskey in the bottle comes down. There leaves more of an air gap, and it interacts with the whiskey. That will help to bring out the flavors. It will help to mellow any harshness in the whiskey. Give it more of a kind of a creamy character. So probably in a few days, when I sample this whiskey again, it'll probably be even more to my liking. As I mentioned, I do really like this Teacher's Blended Scotch. Definitely has a more malty character. Now, I'm about an hour and 20 minutes into the cigar. Throughout, it's been a real loose, real flaky ash. Only get half an inch or so, and it's often just falling off on its own. I've had to touch it up several times. The last time I touched it up, well, when the ash fell off, I could see that it was I guess you would call it starting to canoe. I don't know if you can see it. It's right here on the top of the cigar. It's like tunneling right at the very top of the cigar. Now, the way I understand it, when it does something like that, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how it's packed, but more how it's bunched. Different types of tobacco, especially if they've perhaps not all been cured properly, then what happens is they don't burn at the same rate. And that's all part of the science, part of the art to getting cigars right. Not necessarily in the rolling of the cigar, but in the aging of the individual tobaccos within the cigar. So if one of the leaves was part of a bunch that wasn't cured to a point where they would burn equally to the other leaves within the bunch, they're not going to burn at the same rate. And that's quite likely what has happened here. As I mentioned, inconsistencies within a blend. So hopefully this is the exception to this cigar and not the rule, because I really enjoyed that first one that I had, and this one is just, it's okay. I definitely like it, but it's, when I compare it in my mind to the other one that I smoked, it's just, they're worlds apart. This is nowhere near as good. This would just be an everyday smoke, whereas the first one was something that I would treasure and, you know, really look forward to. And, you know, that would be the type of cigar that I would like to be an everyday smoke just because it was so enjoyable. But at the same time, you would want to keep it special, so you wouldn't smoke it every day. But, you know, nothing special about this cigar. So I'm going to go ahead and end this review here. I will continue smoking it down, and unless something really phenomenal happens, this will be it for the review. I'll say that this cigar has had loose, flaky ash, dry smoke, wonky burn. Started off with a blast of cayenne pepper and glue, and was a pretty strong cigar when I first lit it. Definitely full body. Well, no, not full body, full strength. The body of the cigar had hints of flint, cayenne pepper pretty much throughout. A couple times in there I picked up some grilled meat. As it became richer overall, there was a slight sweetness on the tip of the tongue. The nub brought on a little bit of meatiness, some minerals. The scent on the smoke was that of a sherry character and rotting wood. So that'll be it for the review. I thank you for once again watching Scorpion Cigar Reviews. I'll catch you next time. Went out again. Second time it went out. But that'll be it. I'll go ahead and relight it, and I'll just continue on. And if something phenomenal happens, I'll come back. But generally, no. Catch you next time.